Greetings, everyone. Hope all of you are having an absolutely fantastic day. I gotta be honest with you, I had no intentions on making this video. It hadn't even popped into my head the possibility of making this video, but Tainted Grail has released, and since that time, so many of you on Twitter and comments on my YouTube videos, in comments on my YouTube and Twitch streams, so many of you have asked, how does this game compare to Avowed? Which game is better, Avowed or Tainted Grail? Didn't know this would come up, but hey, I'm a big Pillars of Eternity fan. I'm a fan of Avowed. I played through it. I reviewed it. I'm a fan of Tainted Grail. I played early access. I played through the full game. I reviewed it. You see the statue right back there. I feel like I'm qualified to venture into this conversation. So since you all want it, I'll go ahead and do it. And as a bonus, I'll add a couple of tidbits at the end of this video about Oblivion as well, and let you know how these two games compare to the newest game from the Elder Scrolls series. Do want to note, if you haven't already, definitely make sure you subscribe, hit that bell down below. There'll be more Tainted Grail content. Obsidian recently announced they're going to release more Avowed DLC. When that comes out, we'll certainly be circling back to Avowed, and I'm quite sure once Elder Scrolls 6 comes out, we'll be doing a lot of content for it here on the channel as well. So definitely make sure you subscribe and stay locked in. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into this comparison. First, I want to start with what both games do well. So in my opinion, both Avowed and Tainted Grail have fantastic exploration. You are really motivated to just go out, search every corner, and check under every nook and cranny. In Tainted Grail, it's of course about equipment and weapons that you can get, but also there are a lot of really cool bosses and enemies that are tucked away in places you never have to go to. So taking the extra time to explore everything is going to also allow you to enter into fights that will really push you and are absolutely thrilling to go through. Avowed also, again, has amazing exploration, but it's more so about how densely packed in these areas are. There's a ton of verticality, and so it's really cool to climb up to these tall places that from the bottom, you might not have even realized this was up here, and then when you take that time and effort, you're rewarded with a chest, with an item, with a weapon, with something that you might not have been able to get otherwise. So both of them just provide really cool experiences when you decide to venture out and explore. And of course, it'd be boring to explore these types of worlds if they didn't also make the overall world interesting and give you interesting characters to interact with. Both games are really good about that. So it's not about you walk and everything feels dead and there's nothing to do. Very consistently, both games are going to throw different quests at you, different characters that you can interact with. Obviously, there are some cool fights between the two of them as well. The world just in general is chock full of interesting, cool things to do that make it a real joy to explore. And then something else both games do very well is allow the player flexibility and how they want to venture into combat. So with Avowed, of course, it's got skill trees for melee, magic, and ranged attacks, and you can mix and match these skill trees in whatever way you see fit. Tainted Grail lets you do the exact same thing, mixing and matching all types of different mechanics to create the exact character you want. I think Avowed provides slightly better flexibility, and we'll talk about that in a bit, but at the end of the day, this is a strength for both games. All right, so that ends the list of what I feel like both games do equally well. Now we're going to get into the list of things that I feel like one game does significantly better than the other game. So first and foremost, Avowed allows you to have companions. You can recruit 4 overall companions in the game, and at any point in time, you can bring 2 out with you. For me, this is a big deal. I definitely prefer party-based games. All of your party members are fully voice acted. They have their own unique mechanics that are not available to the main character, and all of them have at least one quest associated with them, and some of them have full quest lines that you can go through in the game. It definitely helps to flesh out the experience, and it's something Avowed focuses on. The next thing that I feel Avowed does better than Tainted Grail is the main quest. While both games have enjoyable main quest lines, I feel like Avowed's is significantly better. Now, interestingly enough, both of them pretty much have the same type of main quest. You have a voice in your head from an older, powerful being, and you spend the majority of the main quest going through the memories of this being to find out more about who they really are and what they have done. And then at the end of the game, you have to make a decision regarding whether or not you agree with what they have done, or at least whether or not you side with that particular creature. The reason why I feel like Avowed's version of it is so much better is that you have a lot more agency in Avowed's version of the quest. In Tainted Grail, you cannot change King Arthur's opinion. His feelings are his feelings, and while you all can talk back and forth, of course, and he'll listen to your perspective, you don't really have the ability to change his mind or change the way he sees certain things. So at the end of the game, you just have to make a decision about whether you side with him or you don't. Whereas in Avowed, even if at the end of the game, you are completely disgusted by what the deity has done, you might still end up siding with them because you have a lot of agency to change their perspective and make them see things in a completely different way, to the point that you're satisfied the deity is going to operate in a much different fashion, and therefore you're comfortable siding with them. And so consequently, at the end of Tainted Grail, I felt like the options that were provided to me were the same options anybody who finished the game were going to get. As opposed to in Avowed, it felt like the options available to me were the culmination of everything that I had done before. And so it was a much stronger feeling and a much stronger pull. Also, in my opinion, Avowed does a better job of providing context and color for the decisions the deity has made in the past. In Tainted Grail, all the memories you see are from King Arthur's perspective. You of course see discussions with people who strongly disagree with them and strongly push back against them, but you don't really see those conversations from the perspective of those people who felt so strongly about what King Arthur did. Whereas in Avowed, many of these memories, you can see them directly from the perspective of people who used to worship this deity or who were directly harmed by this deity. And so it provides context in a completely different fashion, and that really pays off over the course of the game. Another area where I feel like Avowed is stronger than Tainted Grail is in the lore. Now, both of these games pull from a strong, pre-established foundation of lore. In the case of Tainted Grail, of course, they can pull from King Arthur's mythology and everything that that entails. Whereas in Avowed, it's pulling from the Pillars of Eternity series, which has already had 2 games, a ton of lore involved with it. And so there's a lot of content there, and Avowed adds more lore on top of it. In my opinion, Avowed takes full advantage of the lore that came before and does everything in its power to just fill up its entire game world with a ton of things that will be very, very familiar for anybody who's a fan of Pillars of Eternity. And that's why I consistently say, if you're a fan of Pillars of Eternity, then I think Avowed is a game that you really, really need to play. I don't feel like Tainted Grail takes as much advantage as it should of the King Arthur mythology, because at least in my playthrough, there was not nearly enough content regarding the Knights of the Round Table. I only met a couple of Knights of the Round Table, whereas when I was about to start playing the game, I thought, oh man, I'm gonna run into Galahad, Lancelot, Guinevere, Merlin. They're gonna be all over everywhere and probably trying to stop me because I plan to turn against Camelot. And that's gonna be so cool to see a different interpretation of all these different characters that we've come to know and love. That is not the experience I had at all. I only interacted with maybe 2 Knights of the Round Table. The vast majority of characters I interacted with didn't feel like they were actually pulled from the mythology. It felt like characters who were just created for the game. Once again, a lot of these characters are very interesting to talk to. It's a great world to go through. So there's a lot of strengths of it, but I feel like from a lore standpoint, Avowed provides you with a much better experience. Another thing Avowed has over Tainted Grail is that it has guns. You can play with pistols or with arquebuses, and there's an entire list of skills that specifically revolve around how good you are at using guns. And honestly, it's a ton of fun to be able to make use of that. Using ice magic to freeze a character and then switching over to an arquebus to shoot them and shatter them is deeply satisfying, and Tainted Grail doesn't really provide you with an equivalent experience. On a similar note, while both games have a focus on flexibility from the standpoint of the mechanics you can use, I feel like Avowed does it better because Avowed doesn't limit what type of equipment you can use based upon your attribute scores. Tainted Grail provides you with a ton of different equipment that's meant to fill a ton of different roles, but the problem is, in order to get the full capabilities of that armor piece, you have to be able to clear certain attribute numbers that almost all of them have. So you might see an armor that says, hey, it'll increase your melee damage by 5% and it'll increase your armor by 2 and does something else great, right? But in order for that to count, you have to have 6 strength, 6 endurance, and 4 dexterity. Well, if you're a character who is actually put all of your points into spirituality because you want to be a spellcaster, but at the same time, you just want to wear some armor that's going to give you a little bit more protection, Tainted Grail doesn't really provide you the flexibility to do that. Now, this doesn't matter nearly as much by the time you get to like the middle of Act 2, because you get so many attribute points, it's really no problem to dump 6 into a particular attribute so that you can wear some specific gear. But the middle of Act 2 is damn near half of the game, right? So you have to really get far into the game before the true flexibility becomes available. Whereas with Avowed, it doesn't have those sorts of limitations. You can put on whatever armor you want, whatever accessories you want, and you can use whatever weapons you want freely. And so it gives the player a lot more flexibility to decide what kind of character you actually want to be. And then the final thing I'll say Avowed does better than Tainted Grail is that it really leans into fantasy. There are multiple races. You can be human or elf, and you're actually not either race. You're actually a godlike, which is a totally different race with a different classification all unto itself. You're going to meet a ton of different creatures from a ton of different races all throughout your journey. Tainted Grail does not provide you with that type of experience at all. You can only be a human. All of the people you're going to speak to are human. If you meet a non-human, you're almost certainly going to have to kill them. So for those of you who are looking for a full fantasy experience that makes you feel transported to this completely different mystical land, Avowed is probably going to do a better job of that than Tainted Grail will. Now, of course, after all of that, some of you might be thinking that, hey, clearly Avowed is a much better game than Tainted Grail. Hold your horses. Let's talk about the things that Tainted Grail does better than Avowed. In my opinion, the combat in Tainted Grail is much better than Avowed. First and foremost, it's significantly difficult. Completing some of those major boss fights was a truly satisfying feeling. There's a much larger variety of foes in Tainted Tainted Grail compared to Avowed. So as you move forward into the different acts, it's going to start throwing more and more different enemies at you, whereas Avowed had memes about it regarding how often the game just threw bears of a different type, which ironically Tainted Grail has a lot of bears as well, but it has a lot of other creatures also. So by far, definitely Tainted Grail is going to provide you with the better combat experience. As far as mechanics, yes, it's true that Avowed has guns. Tainted Grail has summoning, and it's extremely rare, at least in my experience, that RPGs provide you with a summoning experience that you can use as your main way of attacking. Usually you can use summons as a secondary option just to throw it out there and mix things up a little bit, but it's rare that you can create a character who strictly revolves around summoning and it's actually extremely powerful. That's definitely an option that Tainted Grail provides you. I played as a summoner and it was absolutely fantastic all the way through. Avowed doesn't have anything close to that. While Avowed does have a better main quest, I think Tainted Grail consistently provides much better side quests than what you get in Avowed. The side quests in Tainted Grail are written extremely well, and even more importantly, you never know what's going to happen. Because there's such a large variety of foes, when you enter into a cave, oftentimes you got no clue what you're about to come up against. And this can put you in situations where the game completely throws you off in the best way possible. There are so many very, very memorable moments I have from playing Tainted Grail that strictly revolve around the side quest it provides. Also, while I do believe the main quest for Avowed is better than Tainted Grail, that revolves around the dialogue, the decisions you're able to make, things of that nature. But as far as the setting, like what kind of places you go to in order to move the quest forward, I think Tainted Grail is significantly better than Avowed. A lot of the places you go to for the main quest in Avowed feel like just larger versions of the camps and caves that you went to when just exploring the general world. Whereas in Tainted Grail, it has 2 or 3 really, really massive places that are specifically for the main quest that feel very, very different from what you experienced in the rest of the game in the best way possible. The corrupted temple, the king and queen's castle, the gauntlet that you have to go through for Act 3, all of those were really, really cool to me, very, very memorable, and I think they were much better set pieces than what Avowed provide. Also, I mentioned that Avowed does a better job of leaning into fantasy. Some of you don't like fantasy. Some of you prefer dark fantasy and art that provides a much more realistic experience for the player. For those of you who prefer that, you're going to enjoy Tainted Grail much more. Avowed tries to be dark. It tries to definitely convey that the stakes are high, but it's kind of up and down on that. And I think the environment you walk through oftentimes don't do a good job of reinforcing that. Whereas Tainted Grail does an incredible job at consistently conveying to the player that these are dark times and there is despair all around you, and you're probably the only person who can turn it all around. This is really, really high quality dark fantasy. And then the final thing that I'll say, I think Tainted Grail does better than Avowed. I think overall, Tainted Grail is a better written game than Avowed was. Avowed's writing, even though its highs are better than the highs for Tainted Grail, it's too up and down. The writing is not consistently good. Whereas in Tainted Grail, I felt like on a very, very consistent basis, the writing was strong. It was interesting. They provided some really interesting and cool characters for you to interact with. And I can't remember a time during the game where I felt like the writing was bringing things down and making the situation worse. So after all that is said and done, which game do I personally believe is better? Personally, I like Avowed more than I like Tainted Grail. But keep in mind, this is coming from someone who's kind of like a Pillars of Eternity fanatic, right? Like, I really, really love the Pillars universe. And so to see Avowed take that universe that I love so much and then bring it to life in a way that I never expected to see it. That was such a cool experience that Avowed kind of has a special place in my heart. But if you're not a fanatic like that for Pillars of Eternity, and you're looking for the game that does the best job of taking what would usually be considered like that Elder Scrolls experience and translating it into something else, I would probably say that Tainted Grail does a better job of that. And you can see the list of reasons why. Now, with that being said, of course, both of these games take a lot from the Elder Scrolls series. So how does Oblivion compare to them? Now, take everything I say with a grain of salt. I did a live stream of the remastered version of Oblivion, and it was about maybe 3 hours. So I've got like 3 to 5 hours in that game overall. I played the original Oblivion way back when it came out, but I don't remember a ton about it. So this isn't going to be nearly as expansive as the other two sections we went through, but there are some things that I can easily throw out that I know as far as how Oblivion compares to Avowed and Tainted Grail. First and foremost, Oblivion has way more content than both games. Like, you can legit say that you could put 500 hours into Oblivion. There's just a massive amount of things to do. Also, the dungeons you can go through in Oblivion are way larger than what you get in Tainted Grail or Avowed. So if you love just walking into a dungeon and then getting lost in a sea of tunnels and corridors and different enemies, Oblivion is going to give you that experience over and above the first two games. And all of that together means out of the three games, Oblivion is the one that gives you the best bang for your buck, especially if you're able to get it for free on Game Pass, which you could also do for Avowed, by the way, if you happen to have Game Pass. Whereas Tainted Grail, you're not getting it for free no matter what. You are going to have to pay, but I believe it's only around $50. That's definitely economical for the type of massive experience it's going to provide players. Another thing Oblivion has over both Avowed and Tainted Grail is the Elder Scrolls lore. This is some of the best lore in gaming, and Oblivion takes full advantage of it, building on it in really fascinating ways. And it's even going to be more interesting and impactful for you if you're someone who has already played Skyrim, because a lot of the things in Skyrim either call back to or were influenced by the events of Oblivion. So from a story and lore standpoint, Oblivion is going to touch a nerve, especially with longtime gamers who are really familiar with how the series has evolved. There are, of course, some aspects where Oblivion is not going to be as good a time for you as the other two games. First and foremost, it absolutely feels dated. It feels like a dated experience. It feels like, even with the graphics update, it feels like a game that came out quite some time ago, whereas obviously Avowed and Tainted Grail are much more modern experiences. Now, for some of you, that's going to be a joy, but for a lot of you, it's going to be a pain point, and it's going to make you decide that, you know what, this game isn't really for me. And then the other thing I would mention as to why this game wouldn't be as good an experience is, most especially if you're playing on console, there are wide reports that Oblivion is just not performing well. Players experiencing frames dropping, crashes, things of that nature. There are a couple of different YouTube pages that have talked about this extensively that you can look at, but it definitely seems like more needs to be done to patch this up. And there are some serious questions about whether or not the effort is going to be put in order to patch Oblivion up properly. Seems like this is not as big a deal at all if you're playing on PC. So if that's the case, you might want to check into it and see what the performance is like on PC, but definitely on console, a lot of people have reported that they're not having a good time. And that's it. That's my overall comparison of Tainted Grail versus Avowed, with just a little splash of Oblivion thrown in. Hopefully this video helped you all, gave you some perspective, and allowed you to make your decision about which game you'd like to play first. But at the end of the day, to be honest with you, I recommend all three games. I think all of them provide a really awesome experience in their own way. And if you love stories, if you love great games, you might as well try out all of them. Leave your feedback down below. If there are any questions you had that I didn't answer here, by all means, let me know. I'd be happy to help. And I hope all of you enjoyed this video. Take care.